Hello and welcome to another episode of R&R's Ask the Expert. I'm Kayla McGowan, editor-in-chief, and today we are talking about building trust and awareness with homeowners. My special guest today is Holly Baldwin. She is the Senior Customer Success Manager at DocuSketch. I could go on about her, but many of you know who she is. So without further delay, please welcome Holly.
Thank you so much. You're so sweet to me.
You are so welcome. I mean, we know each other at this point, right? So it's like, I'm not gonna just fluff her intro. Like she's gonna just show all of her expertise here. And you get to work with contractors on a regular basis. So the insight here is going to be very relatable for our guests. And, we've done Technical Tip Tuesday, which has been very successful. So I'm glad that we kind of get to expand here on a recent survey that you guys actually sent out and had tons of feedback on. And interestingly enough, nearly half of Americans actually confuse restoration with general contractors or even appliance technicians, which I can kind of see that. And we probably only know this industry because, well, we're in it, right? So why do you think that there's such a misunderstanding in this area, and how can the industry change that perception?
So I think a lot of it, and like you said, like we only understand it because we're in it. And I don't realize that until I have a conversation and they say, like, what do you mean? Like they'll call me and say, I have friends that'll call me and be like, do you know a plumber? And I'm like, no, no, I don't know a plumber. They don't like they just like put everything together. So they're like construction, all those things. I think in the residential world, right? Because that's typically where the survey was coming from just general people that were taking it. They don't understand because they probably never had a loss. They've never experienced like most homeowners. I mean, I've lived in my house almost 10 years. I've never, thankfully, had any type of a situation where I've needed to contact a Serv Pro and say, hey, I, need you guys, your services. So if they've never had to embark on that journey of reaching out to a restoration contractor, they're not going to know. And they're just going to kind of throw that in the mix and say, you guys are kind of all in one, or not understand that there's a pretty significant difference in that. So that's my opinion, my 2 cents on that, just from a residential standpoint of never needing to use the service. So they're not going to understand what the service offerings are.
Yeah, I agree. And I would definitely say I'd never had a loss until I was actually in the industry. And funny enough, I didn't call a restoration contractor. I actually called a plumber because it was my water heater. And so, like, the referral went from the plumber to the restoration contractor, but a homeowner doesn't really pay attention to that. All they hear is, hey, we're sending somebody else out here to fix the problem. So, I think it's just very interesting as a homeowner or even as a tenant, just in general, when you see a plumber, HVAC, restoration contractor, you just automatically assume that they're all in one business together and they just happen to have different cars or something. Like that's kind of how the homeowners really see us. And I think because I'm in this industry, my family will actually ask me, hey, who do I call for this? And I'm like, well, restoration is a little different, but if you wanted to find somebody in your area that's reliable, here's the steps that you can take, right? And so it's not surprising that homeowners like really just lump us in. I think a better job for us would just really stress like disaster restoration, or, maybe it's like, hey, we don't take care of your plumbing and your HVAC. We actually take care of the dry out and the mitigation and the restoration side of things, which mitigation, restoration, remediation to a consumer, what the heck does that mean, right? So all these layers makes it really hard for the average consumer to really understand who we are. So interesting fact here, only 12% of homeowners would actually call a restoration professional first after a disaster does happen, whether it's fire, water, mold, plumbing issues. 12%, that's crazy. And 72% actually said that they'd rely on their insurance for guidance, which actually that's a little refreshing that I actually did see that number because, most people go to Google or AI these days. So how can restorers actually position themselves to be that first call instead of, maybe the second, third call down the road?
Yeah, I think that restoration contractors like having billboards obviously is like really important, right? So like it says, their company name, but also what do you do? Like at a quick glance, an advertisement needs to tell someone who you are and what you do. So those two things I think are really important. So like advertisement, obviously, like you said, Google, if they do a quick Google search on like water loss or whatever, obviously certain things are going to pop up, right? But I agree with you, Taylor. I want to make sure I point that out that like you said 72%, right? For the that would call their insurance. I think that that's great because I got really good insight from a franchise this morning. Shout out to Kate. But he was like, he said we tell our, we want our insurance companies. We build a relationship with the insurance company because we want the homeowner to reach out to the insurance company. We want them to go through them, but we want the insurance company to have a relationship with us to say, hey, this is the person that you need to call, right? So the insurance company is the one doing the referral, which I think is a really cool kind of a different way of looking at, especially residential, right? Because people aren't going door to door knocking on people's houses and saying, hey, I can do your water and fire and cleanup services. Like
Yeah.
that doesn't happen. If it does, I would be really interested to know how that works because maybe there are people out there that do that. But for the general population, people aren't going through neighborhoods and doing those types of things. So I think that restoration contractors to kind of set themselves up for success there for to get those calls would be to have that relationship with the insurance company. That way that the insured is going to reach out to them because they're going to say, hey, my agent told me to reach out to you because they have a great relationship because they trust their insurance company, right? They've been paying them for 20, 30 years, who knows? So they're going to trust whatever their referral is. So I think that that's a really good way of kind of setting yourself apart in the market for residential, especially.
Yeah, and I would definitely say too, just with the way that the tide is turning in the industry, people are leveraging their insurance a little bit more, which means we should build those relationships to your point, right? It's like a backdoor referral, right? Or a backwards referral, I guess you might want to say.
Yeah.
But even you mentioned like billboards, I think it's important to even get involved with like your community, sponsor a sports team. Like, a lot of people neglect the Chamber of Commerce. That's a really great way to get involved as well. And so just really putting your name out there, but also relationship building. Like, if you have the opportunity to go and build relationships with your local insurance carriers and adjusters and offices, do it, right? Because at some point you're actually going to have to call on them for something as well. And so why not build that relationship and then have that partnership where it's like, hey, I know who to call. No big deal, right? Especially if we're seeing the numbers show that consumers are calling the insurance, which again, that's so reassuring because like I Google things. I don't really call my insurance, so I'm not in that 72%, but you know, I also think too that there's a process. You're going to file a claim with your insurance, and so they're going to refer. And so I think, that's also the other thing you have to remember. If it's a claim, they have to contact their insurance. So what better way to kind of get your foot in the door as a restoration contractor, especially if you're new in the game, or even if you're like, hey, I want to try something different, this could be the way to do it. I recently talked to somebody about referral like networks and partnerships, and it was just amazing to hear like down to like your landscapers, like build a relationship with the landscaper because if you never know, like if they're a regular for them and they say like, hey, Joe, I'm having problems with this. Do you know who to call? They would refer you. So there's creative ways to actually build those relationships and have a bigger presence with the consumers. So another interesting thing from this survey is 28% of Americans are very confident that they could find a restoration professional that they trust. Keyword trust here. What strategies have you seen work best for your guys' clients that help build trust before anything ever happens? And 28% isn't a lot, but it's still a little scary because sometimes you can find people that aren't reliable and trustworthy. So, what have you kind of seen work for those that you work with?
Yeah, so Google reviews are huge, right? Like that's a big push in the market. There's companies out there like Thrive that do that, that help franchises, that help companies to be able to do that pay per click, because a lot of people don't realize that there's so much art that goes into it. Like it's not just as simple as like, hey, you're gonna get a good Google review and then you're at the top of the list. Like, no, there's like an algorithm, like there's a whole process that I am beyond understanding it, but it's like I understand that there's a process and it's bigger than I ever thought it was, right? So like getting Google reviews and getting consistent Google reviews. So like having your customers like after they use you guys, like, hey, if you guys don't mind, if you'll do a Google review, I'm gonna send you a gift card just for doing a review, like just to, straight up honest, what was your feedback? Because even like nowadays, people have just like paid people to go do reviews and like all that kind of stuff. But whenever they're like, hey, they worked on my house and, like you can see like there's an authentic review. It's not a bot review.
Yeah.
I think that Google reviews are huge in the market because think about when you go, for me at least, big foodie. If I'm going to a new city, I'm looking at the reviews. I'm not going to go somewhere that the reviews are not good. Like if the review is a 2.2, I'm going to find somewhere that's a 4.6. And, I'm looking at pictures, all that kind of stuff. So the more that somebody can know about you, like from another experience, the better. And the second part of that is word of mouth. If somebody has a great experience with you, they are going to refer you work. Like if you have a tree trimming service come out and they do a great job and they clean everything up and they tell all about how great your services were, guess what? I'm going to tell my neighbor next time that they need a tree cut down. Oh, hey, you should contact this guy. They were great. Here's all the things that they did. Yada, yada, yada. Like so for me, I'm like, it's word of mouth and Google reviews. That's like the two things. And I think for a long time, like Google reviews has been pushed, obviously, but I don't think, people take how important that they are seriously because they don't see sometimes you don't see that return on investment whenever you're paying those companies that are actually managing those types of things. They're not seeing that return on investment immediately, but what they're not seeing is when that consumer is going to look for a restoration company in their area, and that's what's popping up is them at the top. So I think that more and more as we get into marketing and kind of the digital. I mean, we've always been in the digital world, but it's gotten a lot more digital with AI, to your point. I think that that's going to be really important for, restoration companies to continue to get that work is for them to have good success rates and good customer feedback.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you talk about the Google reviews because I was just at a Violand, event last week, and that was a topic of conversation, which Google reviews always are. But it was interesting. One of their advisors there mentioned, like, 5, 10 years ago, if you had like 200 Google reviews, like that was great. Like now we're in the era of like, if you don't have 1,000 and more, like
Forget
I'm not even looking at your stuff. So, that's what the average consumer is thinking. And to your point, Holly, being a foodie, I'm a foodie myself. I know we've enjoyed several meals and we were both like, what would be good? So, it's a topic of conversation, right? Like you're going to Google, even if you're looking at it, it's like we wouldn't even go here if it's not a 4.6 or higher, honestly. Let's be dead honest here because, people are human. There's bad days. And so it's like, okay, 4.6 seems like a good number, even 4.5. And
it.
so if you don't have that review and then you don't have 1,000 or more reviews, some people are just going to the next one. They're looking at the next person in line, and if they have 1,000 reviews, that's probably who they're going with, honestly. And so you said something that was really great is like, hey, ask people to leave a review, right? Like just it doesn't hurt to ask whether it's a good or a bad response, honestly, or even if they didn't choose you. They can actually leave you a review based on the character of your staff and how they were handled, right? So at that point, Google appreciates that even if they didn't select you for the service, that you still gave 5-star customer service. So for all of you restoration contractors like listening, any customer, whether they sign or don't sign, they are a potential review for you, especially if they said that you had great customer service. And if they're telling you that, that's a 5-star review. Make sure you take that extra effort and kind of give them the opportunity to share that, right? Because you have people like Holly and I looking at reviews and making our decisions based off those reviews, right? So with all that being said, another cool stat from this survey was that 94% of homeowners actually gather multiple quotes, not just for restoration, but how can restoration companies kind of compete beyond the price, right? Like what differences matter the most in today's market? One of them, of course, is customer service and communication, but what other things stand out, which reasonably we should be reasonably within the same price point. So, I would really say it's not really about the money, but what other differentiators could there potentially be in today's market?
Yeah, and I'm a big proponent of like you get what you pay for in a lot of scenarios, right? Whether it's clothing, food, whatever, like in most cases, you should be getting what you pay for, right? So in restoration world, you should be getting what you pay for. So if you're paying for a premium service, then you should be getting premiums, you should be getting premium service if you're paying for it. But unfortunately, that's not always the way that it goes. And the most like restoration companies that I've seen that have been the most like successful in like getting bids, things like that, they have this outstanding way of talking to people and communicating with people, right? Like you said, like customer service is it. But when they do the follow-ups and they come back and they offer to come back and they say, hey, once we're done with the service, we're going to come back in, 6 weeks and we're going to check in and make sure that everything still looks good. I'm going to put a moisture meter on your wall, make sure everything is still good. It should all still be fine. But you're like giving this customer a peace of mind that everything's still fine because I'm coming back to check on it and make sure it's good. And it's not costing you anything. It's costing me something because I'm having windshield time to get there, right? Like I'm having to go out and check it again, but I'm building and continuing that relationship with you because think about it from this perspective too. Like 9 times out of 10, when they're doing like a residential loss, you're not just there for 2 days. Like sometimes you're there for weeks, sometimes you're there for months, depending on how bad the damage is. At this point, if the insured has been home, maybe they're living in a different part of the home and things like that, you've been interacting with them, right? So maybe you're seeing them take their kids to school, or maybe you're seeing them take their daughter to ballet, or maybe you're seeing them take their son to football. Hey, how did their game go, by the way? I wanted to know, like, did they win the other night when they played? You're building a completely different relationship with them because now they feel comfortable with you on a different level because you've been around their family. Like you've been like in their atmosphere, right? So in their bubble, so to speak. So like even though it's still for a short time, you never know like what that impact could be. Or think about like, there's obviously older people, widows, things like that that don't maybe have companions and you're being that person for them, not with like a money making mentality or hungry mentality, but just it's just, I think that we miss out on that a lot and just that human aspect of connection and how important that it is because you don't ever know like how you're going to impact somebody just by doing a quick follow up. Like, hey, I'm going to be back in 6 weeks. Like, oh, like again, it's peace of mind, but like for somebody else, it might be like, oh, I'll get to see so and so again. Like, that's so, I just think about it from that perspective of like, you just never know like what that follow up means or, just that extra step. And I say white glove service a lot because I believe in it like just taking that next step to say, hey, like, were you satisfied with that? Are you happy with that? Like for me, like with new customers, I'm reaching out, within a few months at least to say, hey, are you good? Like, is everything good? Is everything going well? Because I'm hoping that they appreciate that I'm checking in to say, hey, but in the same way, if you're not using the service, I'm reaching out to you too, to say, hey, like
Yeah.
you're not using, is everything good? Is there anything I can do to help, like training, anything like that? So I'm all about taking that next extra step just to go back in. So I think for restoration contractors, figure out what that is. Like there's a niche for everybody to do that. So figure out what that extra step is, and it might be different based off of each person. But I think that that kind of answered that. Hopefully, got off a little caveat because I'm like I so believe in relationships because I'm like that's really where a lot of work comes from is those relationships for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I would definitely say customer service is everything in every industry. But for us, we're going into people's homes and businesses. And so it needs to be customized to whoever the consumer is, right? Some consumers love to talk. Some people are like, hey, just give me an update. Like, that's cool. That's all I care about. But you can still have an approach that is that white glove service, but also very personal for them. I mean, who doesn't want to know that they're being taken care of and it's not just another job, right? I think that's the other thing in today's world. It's so fast paced. A lot of times you come across people who it's like it's just their job, and that's just because we're so busy and there's a lot going on in life. If we can just take the time in our line of work to make it personal, ask about, the kids or, ask about, what projects do you have next? Like, even talking to them about upgrading some of the things in their home, maybe they've always wanted to maybe widen that door a little bit or maybe get rid of the carpet and do a hard surface. There's always ways to really bring in that personal aspect of things. Your customer may even ask you like, "Hey, what would you do?" Right? What would you do to your home if you were facing this? And, that gives you the opportunity to really open that door and one, show your expertise, but two, connect with them on a personal level. So I think it definitely does always come down to customer experience and just communication, the way you treat people is really big because at the end of the day, you mentioned it, you get what you pay for. Right? If I wanted to have like a five-star burger, like granted, I would not be going to like fast food, right? But we know if we go to fast food, it's the quality is going to be the same, but it doesn't mean it's the best quality. So I think that's the same thing with us, right? You want five-star white glove service, you need to pay for white glove five-star service, right? And that's like at every industry. So I really appreciate you kind of diving into that because it's true. We're in their space, like we're in their personal space. And sometimes we're like in their bedroom or in their bathroom or, and it's like, okay, now we know you on a personal level and thank you for
Yeah.
trusting us. But the least we can do is like humanize what we do. And I think sometimes, depending on the circumstance, humanization is one of the biggest things, especially if it's like a fire or a hurricane or something like that. People need and like long for that personal humanization in their interactions. So we've talked about a lot, but I think this is an interesting question in a sense. of the restorer's role, if you will. So we know that most homeowners are going to lean on the re like us as restoration professionals and their insurance for guidance. But what role should the restorer play in educating the customer about coverage and claims? And I know we've talked about this before with some other people in the industry, and it's like we don't educate them, which is I know what you're going to say, but how do we get them directed to their carrier and maybe ask the right questions? Because I think sometimes the human interaction, they feel like they have the right questions, but at least as a professional, we can say, hey, maybe you should be talking to your carrier, and these are the types of questions you should be asking.
Yeah, that's great. And I again, I asked my source this morning about this because I was like, I just need to understand this because from a commercial level, like of course you can provide that white glove service and like go over that with them, right? From a commercial level, because that's a completely different beast all in its own. But from a residential, again, you're not going door to door and like knocking and like, hey, do you know what your insurance coverage is? Like again, you're typically not going to do that. So I think that there's a really kind way of doing that whenever they come to you. Maybe they have that relationship, or maybe they reach out and they say, hey, we have a loss, and this is what our insurance coverage says, and da 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 da. Like all the things, right? They're asking you all these questions. You can say, hey, I actually, if you could tell me what your insure, who your insured is, figuring out first, do you have a relationship with that insurance company? I think I say should say the insurance company. Figuring out if they have like who the insurance company is and if you have a connection to them. And if you do, great. That's a perfect handoff. Because if you have a connection to them, then you can say, actually, I know Steve at that office. Here's Steve's number. Reach out to Steve. He will go over all of your coverage information with you. Because I think in residential, we have to be pretty careful, or restoration contractors have to be very careful, I should say, because they don't want to overstep, right? They don't want to go through their entire policy with their insured, because there could be things that they don't understand maybe fully. There could be new things on there. Maybe they changed their insurance policy from the last time they printed it off in 2006. Okay. There's a lot of different things here that could be at play. So it's making sure that you, again, have that relationship with the insurance company. I don't think it would be wrong to even, as a restoration contractor, again, point them in the direction and then contact them if you have the relationship and say, hey, I just want to let you know, I talked to Mary and I advised Mary to give you a call. She was asking me about her insurance coverages, but I just wanted to like give you a heads up. That
Mhm.
way that they know you've done this handoff and they could be expecting a call from Mary if she hasn't called them yet. So I think that that's important to again keep that streamlined communication and again pushing the customer back to the insurance company when they have questions like that are specific to cost, right? Because the restoration company is going to be dealing with the insurance company versus with the insured in order to get paid. So I think that again, just making sure that they're getting that information clearly from the insurance company is pretty important instead of them trying to explain it themselves. Because again, it's totally different. And because I've talked about it before, I'm like, oh, if you're commercial, it's different. Yeah, residential is a whole different ballgame because there's a lot of unknowns there that could be present.
Well, and I would definitely say to your point, like we're in the digital era. So like even if somebody did have a policy from even last year or 2 years ago, like it could have totally changed. And also it's not our job to interpret anything that's in any type of insurance contract, anything like that. And so that also helps us build a backdoor relationship with the insurance if we don't even have one, right? Like
Right.
I think it's just a great way to really show that we have a partnership in some way, sense, or form, and that the consumer is taken care of no matter what. And we kind of push them to the insurance when they have insurance questions, and the carrier pushes them to the restorer when there's restorer questions, right? And so then we can all work together, and at the end of the day, the end goal is still the same, that the consumer is taken care of, right? And also, quite frankly, you don't really have time to really look at their coverage or anything like that because you're doing the physical work of things. And so I think well said, especially with restoration and commercial being two separate worlds. Like, there is a right way and a wrong way in both worlds. They just are handled a little bit differently, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And just let's just take the steps to make sure that we're doing the processes right, respectfully on both ends. And I think we'll have a commercial conversation on another day just because it is so different. Sometimes you think, oh, well, we do this way, it's going to be the same. Some stuff has changed drastically that you can't even compare them. It's apples to oranges at that point. It's not apples to apples anymore. But, all of this data really helps you guys at DocuSketch, but it also helps the industry. And so, well, this wouldn't be an interview without talking about 360, right? Let's just cut to the chase. 360 is really big. It also helps give customers the peace of mind and better understand some of the processes because they can see it in real time. I know we've shared a couple of stories in the past about the role that 360 plays. So how can tools like 360 documentation and other technology that we have in this space help restoration professionals stand out and build transparency in such a wild marketplace, and not just with the consumer, but even with the insurance, because we have to remember we do have to build those partnerships and relationships with the insurance as well. So what would you say, you know, techs and even owners and PMs could really use and leverage to build that transparency?
Yeah, with insurance company and making sure insurance companies, right? Like that's the primary question. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was like, I want to make sure I gauge my response well. So with insurance companies, I think that it's important for the franchises, for for the people who are doing the restoration work to explain why they use 360, right? There is a purpose behind using 360, and the primary purpose it is and should be that you're providing transparency to the insurance company. Okay. Because if I'm providing that to you, there's not a question of how many air movers were there. There's not a question of if we scratched the refrigerator or we didn't. It's also saving them time, right? So there's just a whole different level. It kind of like pulls back this veil on, well, we used to have these pictures with iPads and we used to have these pictures with our phones. And now we have this 360 technology that doesn't miss anything. It doesn't miss any nook and cranny, as long as they're well lit corners, right? That's an important thing. But it's like understanding that the transparency level that you're providing to the insurance and explaining why. Like the why behind this is so that it will help you. And here's all the reasons why it's going to help you. It's going to save you time. So you're not having to drive to the job. You're not having to go to Miss Smith's house. It's going to allow you to see why I charged for insulation because you will see, in fact, I added insulation because it's here in the picture. Like, so it's just, it creates this like open like conversation of like, oh, well, now I see why this happened, or now I see why you charge this. Now I see why this estimate's here because this and this and this happened on this job. So that makes sense as to why you added this many DUs and you left that, air mover in there a few more days. Totally makes sense. I can see, your moisture meter, all those things. So I think that just them understanding the why behind 360 will allow them to say, okay, they're another level, right? Like they're a step ahead in the technology world because I will say, restoration is a very slow adopter of technology, and I'm sure you've seen this, Kayla. You talk to a lot of people; they're very, very slow adopters. Like they are like, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like that's kind of the mentality. And it's not always like gonna be like that because like we got to catch up to technology or we're gonna get behind. Nelson says it all the time. Like he's like, if you're not using 360, you're gonna get left behind because eventually we would like to think that insurance companies in some capacity would want to have that 360 technology. We don't know, what the future looks like in terms of like requirements or things like that, but it helps them. It saves them money. It saves them time. So why would they not want that 360? So just to kind of set themselves apart and just to explain the why. And like you said, go into Chamber of Commerce events or having a lunch and learn at an insurance company's office that you haven't got, you don't have a relationship with and just say, hey, could we come out and just show you like what we use and like what we do and kind of how we're different. So that way that, if you have an insured that needs restoration services, we'd love to be your first call, to make you be that first call. Cause I think that was kind of like the part of the survey that was like, what makes, restoration the second call. The first call should be, maybe the insured and then the restoration company. So I think that would be for me, I think that's probably the best way to answer that would be just to have like explain the why, explain what you're doing it for and how it's helping them and how it's solving a problem because everyone is in the world of getting a problem solved and we all have not enough time. So time is something that we can't purchase. So it's saving them time and we don't know what that looks like for an insurance company or an insurance agent. Maybe they're super busy. So if that's helping them, then I think that really sets it apart to say this is what 360 technology can do for you if you guys go with us as a basically a means for your insured to get taken care of. And also, a bigger part of that is it's going to save them time and allow them to write the check faster and get their insured in their home faster. So that way that they're not calling them every single day saying, hey, when am I going to be able to move back in? So I think that it all goes together. Like the timeline, it can be so seamless when you use 360 because it's like you use 360, you're going to make sure that you can see everything has been, appropriately put on the estimate. You can see everything's there. And then you can get the job done. Insurance pays the restoration company. Homeowner goes back home. Like it just becomes this closer, kind of a tight knit timeline instead of just everything's all over and it's chaotic. Because you hear different stories of different people and different restoration companies and just the chaos that is. 360 kind of takes the chaos out, I believe, and just kind of makes it a more elevated experience.
Yeah, and I would definitely say it tells the whole picture, right? Or the whole story, not the whole picture. It tells the whole story, if you will, right? So the beauty of this is you can see the before, during, and after, essentially. And so there's no like, oh, did I take a picture of that? Oh, maybe I didn't take a picture of that. And we all know we can't go back in time. And so if you miss it, you miss it. But with 360, to your point, you're capturing a whole entire room. I know you have tips on how to make sure you get every nook and cranny, but you're not having to literally turn at every single wall and take a photo or take a picture of the floor and take a picture of the ceiling. Like it's able to capture everything for you. And it's immersive too. I will also say 360 documentation is immersive. I've had the opportunity to look at it and see side by sides and all of these fun things. And I think when there's people on the other end of things who aren't in the field, particularly the adjusters, they're able to see the entirety of the project by simply clicking and dragging with their mouse, opening up notes and things like that. And so it saves time, it saves money, but also it tells the complete story. They're not having to piece stuff together. And you can share those files with your consumers too. So they're seeing everything that the carrier's seeing. So I definitely will say, to your point, technology, we're a little slow. We're a little slow. It's okay. We just want to make sure it's perfect, I guess, is kind of where our mindset is, if you will. And
Right.
we're slowly adopting it. I will definitely say we've seen people with like remote monitoring, and now we have 360 documentation. And I think there's AI is, reared its head and people are really interested in AI. And so I think time is making us, kind of adapt and evolve a little bit faster. And that's a good thing because it also at the back end saves the time and the money, not just for our team and the consumer, but the insurance as well. And so I think it's really important if you're listening and you've been scared to adopt any technology, start simple. Start with documentation, start with, the 360 imagery. It might seem a little scary, but it's not something that you can't master in the matter of minutes, I feel. I've had the opportunity, like I said, to be able to actually document something with y'all's team, and it was great because I was like, if you can teach me this, I'm not a contractor and I'm not a technician. Like our teams in the field will just be able to pick it up and hit the ground running. They know what they're trying to photograph. So, all of you guys listening, pay attention to these survey results, also 360 imagery and technology just in general. If you're not using it now, you should be. 2026, I think, is going to be an even bigger year with technology. I don't have any more questions for you, Holly. Do you have any last closing words before we say farewell to our friends listening?
No, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You are so welcome. I can't wait to have you back on again. And for all of you listening or watching, thank you for tuning into this episode of Ask the Expert. Take care.